Hey guys, okay, I am re-recording this video. I forgot to do screen display, so unfortunately, I have to redo this video. That last video was 32 minutes. I was about to give timestamps and everything. So, current time, my time, it's 5:56. This update for National Hurricane Center came out, I believe an hour ago. So, I will not be discussing the two Atlantic systems, but we will keep an eye on them, especially the first one, because that might pose a threat to the Northeast Caribbean. But the main focus of this video is going to be on Tropical Storm Francine, which is organized quickly and is now a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm and has a minimum pressure of 996 millibars. This was updated about an hour ago. So we're going to go through this relatively quickly, just so I don't have to waste as much time because I failed the video. For Francine, the storm is expected to become a hurricane as it's approaching the coast of Louisiana on Wednesday. I believe it's more likely that it becomes a hurricane sooner rather than later, because its organization is already there and it's already somewhat semi-developed in Iowa. And I'll show you guys what I mean in just a second. So, and there are storm surge warnings in effect for the coastlines of Upper Texas, with Southeast Texas, and then for almost all Louisiana, especially around the Vermilion Bay area, as you guys can see down here. I'll widen this out later. There is a chance of up to 10 feet of storm surge, which is unsurvivable. So this type of storm surge will prompt mandatory evacuations, and you need to leave now if you can. Another thing we'll talk about is that the hurricane force winds will be moving ashore into Louisiana sometime between Wednesday night and early Thursday morning. So you won't really see the storm or conditions deteriorate, and it will be too late to leave once it's not actual nighttime. So you need to get all your preparations done by tomorrow, which is Tuesday, or very early Wednesday, as tropical storm force winds will begin to move into Louisiana around Wednesday afternoon, especially Wednesday evening. Francine is also expected to bring heavy rainfall and considerable flash flooding risk to northeast Mexico, which we won't mention too much, but we'll talk about a little bit. And especially a little bit of Texas, but mostly Louisiana and into the Mississippi River Delta. Not the mouth of the Mississippi, which is here, but the Delta area, which is Arkansas and Mississippi, northeast Louisiana, and then Tennessee. We're going to be talking about that too. So, surge. It's our first topic we're going to be talking about. As you can see, around Vermilion Bay and around from the south central coast of Louisiana, from around Cameron, Louisiana, which was hit by Hurricane Laura and Delta back in 2020, to Port Fourchon, which is closest to Hurricane Ida's landfall in 2021, we are seeing about 5 to 10 feet of potential storm surge. And this is really depends on where the storm exactly moves. If Francine moves more to the east, there will be more storm surge around Port Fourchon, and especially more storm surge that could pile, especially around the mouth of the Mississippi, and then also wrap around towards New Orleans and Mississippi over here, the state. A slightly further west track would mean more storm surge goes right into Vermilion Bay, and that will also mean that Cameron, Louisiana, and around Cameron, Louisiana will have more storm surge than what is listed here. Currently, from about Cameron eastwards, 5 to 10 feet of storm surge, or up, or maybe slightly higher than that in some areas. Because a lot of southern Louisiana is swampland, a lot of this will go far inland. To just west of Cameron, 3 to 5 feet. The storm surge risk along the Texas coast, for the majority of it, is relatively low. The main reason is that Francine is moving in a tracks like this. Someone like that. I'm going to try and draw this the best we can. Someone like this. So, by the time Francine is moving or at your latitude, the majority of storm surge that you will get is when Francine is to your south. By the time Francine is to your east or to your north or to your northeast, wind will be pulling off of the Texas coast and will be pushing the Gulf of Mexico out to sea. So your peak storm surge in Texas will most likely be Tuesday night into Wednesday because of that. While in Louisiana, storm surge will most likely be before landfall, during landfall, and after landfall, because the storm will be pushing water onto the coast before landfall. It will be pushing water into the coast at landfall, and then after landfall, winds will still be coming off the Gulf of Mexico, so you will still have storm surge after landfall as well. And the threat for storm surge increases in eastern Louisiana and in southern Mississippi after the storm makes landfall, as winds begin to come from the south and east. Now on to rainfall. Rainfall in Louisiana is expected to be 4 to 6 inches for the vast majority of the state that will be directly impacted by the center of the storm. In northwest Louisiana, there's a bit less rain, whereas in central Louisiana, there's a bit more rain, and there's still a decent amount of rain that's over New Orleans and just off the coasts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Panhandle of Florida. The main thing to keep in mind here is that the heavy rain that does come from Francine will really be dependent on where the band's exactly set up, where they train over these areas, and it will also be where the center is. Because dry air is expected to impact Francine in some way, the western side of the circulation will have less rainfall. But that also means if you're closer to the center of the storm, this 12 to 16 inches of rain that's just offshore of southern Louisiana could be pushed onshore, and it could fall onto land. And in addition, with the fact that we'll have storm surge that's piling up the water into the coastline, because of that, use a better color here. Because of that, that means the rain that does fall will not be able to escape back into the Gulf of Mexico and will back up and lead to flooding. So because the rain that does fall will be falling onto relatively saturated ground, it will instead just keep building up, as it cannot efficiently go into the sea. So we'll color this as the Gulf. Water cannot efficiently go into the Gulf because the Gulf is pushing inland. So this is not going to be able to happen. So water levels inland will rise because the water cannot escape. So there's a potential for catastrophic flooding in some areas of Louisiana, especially from storm surge. But if we look for flash flooding specifically, for the majority of Louisiana, around 2 to 3 days from now, there's a moderate risk of flash flooding for the majority of the state, from around Lake Charles and Cameron, Louisiana, all the way to New Orleans, all the way through Baton Rouge and into southwestern Mississippi, just outside of Jackson, Mississippi, which I believe is the capital of that state. So it's very important to keep that in mind, that heavy rain, in addition to storm surge, will lead to widespread flooding in large amounts of Louisiana on Wednesday and Thursday, and then the days afterward. So that will make travel impossible in some places, or will have to force reroute you to other areas. It can also be a hazard to you, and you may die inside the flooding if you are not careful and if you do not prepare ahead of time. So this is something to keep in mind. Also notice, just like on the last graphic, rainfall on the Texas coast is going to be really dependent to your proximity to the coastline. If you're on the coastline, it's going to be more rain, but the cutoff between a decent amount of rain, a little bit of rain, and no rain is going to be very sharp along the coastline. So Texas should have less impacts until you get to the upper Texas coast, which is around where Beaumont, Texas is. Okay. Now I will pivot to the forecast discussion. The Francine itself, if we look on satellite from tropical tippets, has now developed a somewhat formed eye wall in its inner core. It has this feeder band and it has less convection than earlier. However, it has a defined structure of a feeder band falling in, has a shrimp-like look to it, and it goes like this, and it has this inner core beginning to develop that's a little bit open on its western side. If Francine can consolidate itself and build its core more tomorrow, especially tonight and tomorrow, the storm will be a lot stronger on its approach to Louisiana. If it keeps this structure where it has a decent structure, but it's a little bit delayed due to dry air or things like that, or just a general delay in its organization phase, then the storm will have less time to intensify quickly as it's approaching Louisiana, but will still be a very impactful storm no matter what. It will just impact the final wind and to a lesser extent the surge total, because storm surge tends to stick around a lot longer than the winds do. So we'll look at environmental forecast factors for Francine soon. We'll just look at the quick discussion down here. So we already mentioned how Francine's organizing faster than expected. It has this inner core, and it's already a tropical storm that's at 65 miles an hour. It's expected to be within 36 hours at 100 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane. It could be stronger than this, it could be weaker than this, and I will show you why. But within the next day or so Francine should become a hurricane, and then it all depends on the environmental factors that are impacting it. So we'll go over them, if I can find them. I have these two here. We'll go over them. Sea surface temperature wise, Francine is in the part of the Gulf of Mexico, the southwest part of the Gulf, including the Bay of Campeche, where sea surface temperatures are on average 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above normal. Or for translate, for people who use Fahrenheit to translate for you, that is equivalent to 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, which adds a lot more energy that storms can take out of the ocean. This also extends pretty far down, so Francine, when it does move over, as it's moving over into warm water, will not really upwell any cooler water beneath it. As Francine moves northward, it should stay in this range until it's approaching, getting off the latitude of about Corpus Christi, which is about here. And then it should start entering slightly warmer than average sea surface temperatures, and then average to slightly below average as it's making landfall in Louisiana. So this may have a ceiling. The sea surface temperatures may have a slight cap on the ceiling as it's approaching Louisiana. However, the warm water just before Louisiana should give Francine plenty of enough time to intensify pretty quickly. Also, the water near the Louisiana coast, even though it looks cooler, is not actually that cool. There's still a widespread area of 29 and even 28 still there along the Louisiana coast. So even when Francine does move in this area, it's not going to be a tank. It's not going to be a tank in intensity speed compared to if this was 27 to 26. Francine is starting at 30 C to 31 degrees Celsius waters, 86 degrees to 88 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's moving in the 84 and 82, which may slow down the strengthening process as it's approaching land, but due to other factors, this may not happen. But this is still enough to support a hurricane and potentially a major hurricane. This is still enough to support both of those options. So I will skip over to tropical tidbits, and we'll go over the forecast models for Francine. So we're going to look at the GFS, the Euro, and the Icon, and then we're going to switch over to 2 of the hurricane models, and then we'll end the video. For the GFS, Francine, almost all the models have Francine weaker than what it actually is right now. But Francine on the GFS slowly gets its act together, and by the time it's past the Mexico-Texas border in terms of latitude is when it really starts ramping up and becomes this 970 millibar storm right before landfall in Louisiana. It begins weakening and weakens at landfall potentially, or stalls right before landfall in intensity. But as you can see here, you have a strong storm on Wednesday evening actually, coming ashore into Louisiana, and then it makes landfall at night. So you're not going to be able to see anything down here, and plus with the storm surge, it's going to be really dangerous, so you have to evacuate if you live in southern Louisiana, if you live anywhere near the coast or anywhere that's low-lying. Now, why is it showing this? So, why is the model showing this? So we'll look at 250 millibar wind. This is something I mentioned in the video that I failed to record properly. But here's the thing. This upper level anticyclone that's over the Gulf of Mexico is the main thing that's allowing Francine to intensify because it's fanning out its convection. Francine currently is over the western portion of this anticyclone, so it's getting divergent air aloft, and with divergent air aloft, that's allowing more air to rise at the surface to continue feeding the storm. As Francine was close to the coastline, we have two things that can happen. This jet is providing favorable outflow that can allow Francine to rapidly intensify, and we have the potential that the jet cuts right over Francine and weakens it as it gets closer to Louisiana, or at least stalls its intensification phase due to wind shear. Which one takes over is the main thing for how strong and how fast it will intensify. Because as we see, Francine stays under this lighter pocket of this jet and is able to keep its intensity, able to continue strengthening and at least keep its intensity as it's making landfall. The other thing to keep in mind is moisture. The other thing that can hamper Francine is dry air that's coming off the Great Plains of the United States. This dry air could get entrained into the circulation, and this is why rainfall rates on the western end of the system will be less, because there's more dry air, so there will not be there won't be much available moisture to actually cause rain. This dry air can also get into the center of Francine's circulation and interrupt it and prevent the thunderstorms from really blossoming and helping Francine's pressure to drop and the winds to come up. So it really depends how strong Francine gets in the morning and how well it's able to maintain its structure. Because if Francine gets a better structure to be able to keep this dry air out, even with the wind shear, Francine will get stronger as it's able to keep this moisture bubble, but it starts degrading as it gets closer to landfall, and this is why it starts weakening here. If Francine is able to maintain this moisture bubble longer, it will intensify more as it's making landfall. If the dry air gets in sooner, it will not be able to maintain that level of strength and will probably begin slowly weakening as it approaches Louisiana. And that may also reduce the flooding risk from rainfall, but it will not reduce storm surge and it will not reduce the wind by that much. According to the Euro model, around the same time, Euro has a similar strength system, Category 1, almost Category 2 system. These are both initializing 2 week, but at least in two days, we can start seeing the Euro 2 is seeing dry air coming off the Texas coast being entrained into Francine circulation. Now, this doesn't impact Francine enough. Francine's able to flush it out a little bit. However, you still see this dry air is getting around. It's getting deeper in the circulation as Francine's intensifying. So, this could be a possible fail mode for the storm, which would be good for people living on the coastline. This would be really good if the dry air gets in and weakens Francine and doesn't allow it to get as strong as it could be. Like, for example, how dry air kept Barrow from intensifying rapidly in the Gulf until right before landfall in Texas in July. This dry air is going to be pivotal, especially with the jet stream interaction as well. Similar thing on the icon. The storm really starts getting its active right as it's about to make landfall, but this dry slot on this western end is going to be the real thing that determines where the convection that can support Francine in the core will actually be present or not. If the dry air is present, it will not be as present and Francine will not be able to intensify as quickly. But if the dry air is there but it's not able to actually get into the core of Francine, then Francine will be able to intensify quicker than what is seen here. Potentially much quicker than what is seen here. Now we'll look at the hurricane model. So we'll look at the H-Wharf parent for Francine. We'll look at the upper levels, which is here. So we'll look at 200 millibar wind. So the H-Wharf keeps this anticyclone over Francine longer, and that allows Francine to really get going at the 36-hour mark forward, and it really gets down to a 977 millibar storm as it makes landfall just west of Vermilion Bay in Louisiana. This scenario keeps lighter wind shear over Francine, so the shear from the trough is less of an impediment on Francine and more of a benefit, as Francine's still getting this very good outflow, especially to its north and east. In terms of dry air, as we can see, the H wharf has the dry air starting to wrap around into Francine's center, but it's a little bit too late. The dry air starts wrapping into Francine right as it's about to make landfall, so this is too late for Francine to actually begin any real weakening process. And then the dry air wraps in later after it's made landfall. But at this moment, Francine's able to maintain that moisture bubble, and it only really collapses after it makes landfall. So this is a potential scenario where Francine doesn't have dry air impeding it, so it's able to intensify quicker up to landfall before its rapid decline after it hits land. So it's a thing to keep an eye on. With less shear over the storm, the dry air is not going to be able to get in there as easily, so Francine will be able to intensify quicker than what's being listed. We look at the HAPS-A model, similar thing, but a stronger, more eastward-based storm. As we can see on the HAPS-A, over the next 24 hours, Francine's around intensity is now, but it really starts getting its act together tomorrow and into Wednesday, and that allows it to get down to a 970 millibar storm. And the dry air is still getting in there, but as you can tell, by contrast, there's a large moisture bubble still around Francine, and that dry air does not get into Francine circulation until it makes landfall. It has to make landfall for the dry air to get into the circulation. So it's going to be really close to see what happens here. But if the dry air is not as potent as it is, as it's listed here, it's not even actually get in. And if we look up 200 millibar wind, we still have this semi-favorable wind pattern above it. This is a problem still. This will be a problem. And I'll check the last hurricane model. Let's check HAPS-B. HAPS-B has the storm making landfall sooner, but it has Francine strengthening much faster. And we have a 964 millibar storm right off the coast of Louisiana before it starts weakening due to potentially wind shear, but I believe it's mostly dry air. Yeah, dry air and a little bit of wind shear start impacting the storm right before landfall. But even as now, you can see that this HAPS-B has the storm initialized at its current intensity, but doesn't really start ramping up until tomorrow and into tomorrow night, and then it gets into that hurricane status, into that and then eventually to Cat 2, maybe Cat 3 strength here. So it really matters how strong Francine gets tonight, and then how much it takes advantage of its very good environment tomorrow. And then from there, when Wednesday comes around, we'll basically know the intensity will be at landfall pretty much. The only thing that we'll have to figure out is how much is this dry air going to get into Francine circulation and potentially weaken it, and how much will the jet stream above it potentially weaken Francine, or will it be favorable position just enough to help evacuate air out of Francine's center much faster and get it to really bottom out into that major hurricane that could be possible here. We don't know, but that is a possibility. That is something that happened with Hurricane Michael, and that was a Category 5 hurricane that made landfall in the Florida Panhandle right here. So, key takeaways for Francine. Storm surge will be very high along the Louisiana coast because the coast is shallow, and the storm's going to be strong as it's making landfall. The storm will also probably lead to a decent amount of rainfall flooding on the northern side, and maybe a tornado risk in the Mississippi River Delta after it makes landfall, and that wind shear helps get thunderstorms within its feeder bands to begin rotating and produce tornadoes. The second main thing is that Francine's final landfall strength is going to be contingent on whether it continues to outpace the forecast today and tomorrow, as well as whether dry air and wind shear actually pose an actual impediment to the storm when it's approaching land. If the storm is not intensifying as quickly, doesn't keep the same pacing, goes at pace or a little bit slower, then that's a better scenario for Louisiana. If the storm gets intensifies faster, then intensifies faster and gets the structure even more aligned than what it already is, that's a very bad sign, because dry air and wind shear will not be able to weaken a stronger storm as effectively as it would be a Category 1 hurricane or a Cat 2, as we could potentially have with Francine here, which is what the NHC is explicitly forecasting now, the Category 2, at landfall. So, it's very important to keep those things in mind. So, the main takeaways I need you guys to take care of, if you are in Louisiana, especially, Southern Louisiana, it is time to evacuate. You got to do it now. Prepare everything. If you have to stay, prepare. Make sure you hunker down. But evacuate if you are next to the coast. Evacuate at all costs. It's time to start evacuating. You have to. And there are already mandatory evacuations underway in Cameron Parish, Louisiana. So it's very important that you get that done. Another thing. After landfall, from that river flooding and potential tornado risk in the southern United States later, it's very important that you guys keep an eye on your radar and see where bands of rain are setting up, so you know where flooding is going to be most prevalent and where routes that you might need to take might be cut off. It's very important that you do not drive through flooded roads or drive over bridges where the water level is very high, where it's either going over the bridge, way over the bridge, slightly over the bridge, or it's just about to get over the bridge. It's very important not to take those bridges, as bridges can easily collapse under flooding scenarios. And then, just as a general note, keep this in mind. You only have about 2 to 3 days, so it's very important that you start paying attention now and keep in touch with the National Hurricane Center, and other meteorologists that you do trust, to make sure that you are ahead of the storm. That's all I have for you guys today. I will leave all these links in the description for you guys, and I will make sure there's a timestamp for every section of the video. So there will be a section for the environmental factors, which will do sea surface temperatures, we'll do moisture and shear, not separate, we'll combine them. And then I'll have impacts for Francine listed first, and I'll also have, we'll have maybe like track or structure current state. So we'll have at least 5 timestamps for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will try and make another update tomorrow. I feel really bad that the first video I made didn't go through because I made a mistake, but this one should go through. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and just make sure you guys stay safe out there.